This was years ago, when I was still new to D&D, still in my very first campaign, actually. My DM says he wants to train me on how to properly create my own D&D campaign. I accepted and we met up on the weekend. I sat down, eager to learn. He explains we are going to work on the next arc of the campaign together, but assured me he would keep some things hidden from me and that he had faith I wouldn't metagame anything. That sounded fine to me, and I admit I felt proud to be trusted to this degree. But when we started, he sat me down in front of his laptop and said, "All right, you write the story, but I'll do combat encounters." What? I look over at him, confused. I wanted to have something to do with the vampire clans, like that Underworld movie. Dude, I've never watched that. He just puts a hand on my shoulder. You'll figure it out. So there I sat, panicking. I didn't know any of the lore for vampires or the world that he created, and I wasn't prepared to just create a campaign. I kept asking for advice on what to do, asking for what he wants from the game, but he just kept insisting that I had it under control while scribbling down fights. It ended with only about 3 pages done after multiple hours. He expressed that he figured I would have gotten more done. I just apologized and left, and declined further offers to collaborate on the story. Man, I love when people say stuff like, "I want to collaborate with you," and then their definition of collaborate is having you do everything for them. It's just my favorite thing. Look, helping a new DM out is a great and wonderful thing. It's a big reason why I started this channel, but this just borders on exploitation. Come on, guys. I've been binging a bunch of Crispy and Crick Crab, so I decided I would share one of my favorite horror stories from my own experience. Thank you, by the way. I almost hesitate to call it that, though, because it was actually hilarious, but it definitely has all that classic edgelord stuff in it. The game was set in a slightly modified Endunor, an Underdark city in Arleth, which has a popular Neverwinter Nights role-playing server. Endunor is something of a melting pot city where many Underdark races come together for mutual cooperation and/or backstabbing. Since this was set in the Underdark, obviously this was an evil campaign. I decided I would host 3.5 for 3 of my online friends over Discord, one of which was a huge Dritz fan. So was I, and I'm proud of it. And so he knew the Underdark's culture pretty well and wanted to play a priestess of Lolth. In the matriarchal society of the Drow, females who served the Dread Queen were the highest and the proudest and the most powerful, but he was happy to start off as a minor priestess and work his way up. The second played a half-elven bard who had been enslaved, but was owned by an NPC, and the third was a pirate captain who was forced to flee to the Underdark after a crime spree on the surface. He actually sailed down, believe it or not. The Underdark does have its own seas. I also invited a real-life friend to join us, and he wrote up a drow male shadow dancer, rogue with shadow powers. Can you guess who the problem player was here? Believe it or not, it wasn't that guy. It was actually the pirate. Shocking, I know, but it will probably make more sense once I mention he was 8 feet tall, I think it was a Goliath, wore all black, and always wore a mask, never showing his face. We shall refer to him henceforth as the Captain. Now, I am somewhat fuzzy on exact details for much of this game, since it was many years ago, but I do remember for sure that he was belligerent to pretty much everyone he met. The other characters included. I'll include a funny early encounter real quick, then onto the real minor horror. On a mission out into the Underdark, the party was resting at an outpost north of the city. The bar there had a mind flayer for a barkeep. Yes, a mind flayer whom I did lift right above server shamelessly. The captain waltzed in, looked at this mind flayer and declared he wanted the strongest drink they have. The mind flayer looked at him like he was an idiot and telepathically said, "You can't handle the strongest thing we have," which of course only made the captain want more. The captain was served a bottle of pure, ink-black liquid from the literal aberration serving him. When he failed the ensuing con save, he died! Apparently he couldn't handle it after all. How about that? The priestess did revive him though. The best part, and where the actual horror comes in, is when the party is returning to Endunor from a mission. They need to go to Lolth's temple to report anyway, so they go straight to the Devil's Table, which is a drow-only district with a similar culture to the famous city of Menzoberranzan. He sails his ship up to the dock and is confronted by an angry drow official. "Hey, you can't park here, this is a drow dock," the official tells him in a demeaning and haughty voice, at least the most demeaning and haughty I can muster. Now, I deliberately made this guy an asshole because, you know, he's an official, and also a racist guy. However, a sensible man would have quickly realized that he has the ultimate trump card sitting below deck when it comes to dealing with uppity drow males. Not just a drow female, but a drow female priest of Lolth herself. With but a word, the priestess could have this official on his knees begging for forgiveness for delaying her important mission. The captain, though, he had a much better idea than just going to get her. He just cut off the official's leg. And by better idea, I mean a horrible idea, because the man's screams of agony drew the attention of every drow guy in the district, including all of the household guards for each of the great houses of the Devil's Table, who began charging for the dock. The captain then cut off the official's other leg, and he fell into the water, never to be heard from again. Combat began, and the captain was forced to defend his ship with increasingly large numbers of guards entering the battle. He could have at any time chosen to just unlock his ship and leave, but he kept fighting because nobody can defeat the captain. Eventually, a drow wizard saw what was happening. He calmly walked over to the ship, and with a bored look on his face, dropped a fireball on top of it, which killed most of the captain's CR1 crew, and leaving just him and his null first mate on top of a burning ship. Meanwhile, the rest of the party wants absolutely nothing to do with any of this, so the priestess frees the shadow dancer. Did I mention the captain threw him in the brig for some reason? Forgot why that happened, but it was a thing. Probably did to just be a troll. Anyway, yeah, the three of them jump ship and swim away while the captain is sinking behind them. The captain died, and while he certainly wasn't happy about it, it's still one of the funniest D&D stories I have. The campaign fell off shortly after because it had been thoroughly derailed at this point, but also because of scheduling conflicts. It was worth it though, because now I have this anecdote about not causing big trouble in Little Menzoberranzan. The moral of the story is, don't piss off entire districts trying to get your way when an easier and even more obvious solution is basically within arm's reach. Sometimes the most obvious solution is just not the solution players will go to. I, for one, am perfectly okay with giving my players hints, especially early in the campaign when I don't want them to die. However, I know a lot of DMs are just not going to do that, and I think that's perfectly okay and valid. This situation is very unfortunate, though definitely more of a funny horror story than a horrifying horror story. I hope that the whole group parted ways amicably at the very least, even if this encounter was not the best. I will point out that the other players weren't really participating, so this could also be seen as kind of a spotlight hoggy moment. It's important to make sure that when situations like this arrive, you make sure that the other players are still involved in what's happening. I mean, look at it this way, at least the captain went down with his ship. Maybe not in the way that he imagined, but still, it was certainly memorable, and even though this isn't exactly the ideal situation for everybody at the table, it is a memorable situation, and in a lot of ways, this is exactly why a lot of people play D&D. For the stories that you make up on the spot that you're just going to remember forever. At the very, very bare minimum, it's certainly better than many other horror stories we've read on this channel. Hey y'all, first and hopefully last time I ever write here. This happened recently and it's the only table I've ever played in, so I'm very conflicted on how I should feel. I'll be switching up the names for anonymity's sake. I was invited to the table around the beginning of 2020 before the pandemic started by the DM. We can call him George. He explained to me that the sessions would take place at one of the players' houses, Alice. Everything honestly was amazing. Our campaign was incredible and I couldn't have asked for a better first party. And as the party artist, I got to recreate some memorable scenes from our story. I'm getting off track, but after a while, Alice moved in with her partner, Summer, into a new apartment, where they offered to host for us. The apartment was sort of small, but through helping out moving things or bringing in furniture to make it more homey, the place started to feel more cozy for them. I started bringing in my drawings so they could hang them up on walls or have them in a corner. I happily obliged since I had made my character portraits of some members. After a while, we hit a road bump in our campaign as it felt George was hitting a burnout with his game, so Summer decided they could have a shot at DMing to alleviate the stress of weekly games. We started our characters and had another addition to the crew in the form of a close childhood friend of mine, Steven, who was interested in playing the game. We had a good 3 sessions at the start and everyone was having fun, up until session 4. As both myself and my partner, who used to play in the original campaign but was taking a backseat for now, were getting ready, we had the task of picking up Steven. Myself and Steven live relatively close to one another, a 3-minute drive from where I'm at. However, getting to the host's place, that's an hour drive. Steven had messaged me that he might not be entirely able to make it due to that day being his dad's birthday. On top of that, George had an emergency last minute, so he couldn't make it either. But regardless, Alice still wanted to continue with just 2 players. In the end, Steven ended up missing his dad's birthday so he could come with us. I get on my car and go pick him up. On the way to host's house, they call me to ask if I can pick up some water and drinks. I decided to bring them and some extra snacks to share. I hadn't mentioned it before, but to alleviate the budget for food Summer cooks for us while we're in session, we have a fee of $5 per person showing up. Usually if I could, I would give a little bit extra, give it like 10 or 15 plus in occasions, while bringing what beverages we had on top of that, not factoring in the snacks. So we got to their place, the only person there, is Summer, to which I ask if Alice would be back soon. Summer just shrugs and says they went to wash clothes and haven't been back, but it shouldn't be long. We arrived around 6:30 p.m. and we were hoping to start at 7 p.m. Soon 7:30 passed and Alice was nowhere to be seen. We get a call to start without them, but Summer refused as they'd rather get everything started with everyone at the table, but that we could start with eating while we waited. On this occasion, Summer prepared some nice rice bowls with our choice of toppings. Tuna, crab, and some other toppings which are escaping me at the moment. We poured ourselves the toppings, to which at this point, it's 8 p.m. Seeing as how we were only planning on playing till 10, Alice calls asking if we were okay with playing past 12, even 1 a.m., to which Steven points out that he works early in the morning, but he'd play for as long as he could. 8:30 gets here, and Steven asks if it's okay if Summer can just pass the salt from the counter. They pass the salt, but after some time, Summer asks for the salt back, to which Steve hands it to them without a tightly closed lid, and as Summer reaches for the salt, it falls straight into the crab meat, spilling all over it and ruining a perfect crab salad bowl, to which, fair point, that upset Summer, who in turn proceeded to quietly step outside. We all just kind of stayed silent for a bit. My partner and Steven, whom was very apologetic, even offered to pay for any ingredients lost in the accident. At this point, it's 8:40 p.m., to which Alice finally comes in, fuming for some reason, murmuring how she can't catch a break, and how not even a minute in they are ready to leave. I asked if everything is okay, to which Alice explained how Summer was upset and how now they need to go to the store together and waste money they don't even have on things they don't need because of the mess that was made, putting Steven in an even more uncomfortable situation. We all agreed that we were full and that wasn't necessary, but they insisted it was something we needed. We really at this point just wanted to play the damn game, and with only one player missing and only 2 hours of game time, we'd much rather start than eat more of what we already have. Plus, we did have the snacks that we brought. She in turn got more upset, and as quick as she came in, she leaves, slamming the door behind her, causing one of the shelves they have to fall over due to the force of the door. Alice returns to explain that they didn't slam the door, that it just does that all the time, to which we just, I don't know, stay silent. With no one agreeing or seeing their point, Alice just comes at us in a very annoyed and frankly condescending tone, asking if we'd please not burn down her house while she was out. This came out of the blue, since in the 2 years of knowing her, I never thought I came off in that way, where she couldn't trust me or my partner with that sort of responsibility. It may have been the already growing tension in the room, or some pent-up rage she had, but we had spent weekends at the apartment before, so I really don't know where it was coming from, and apparently neither did my partner, who replied with, "Hey Alice, that was really uncalled for. We really have never given you a reason to think about us like that." This struck a chord in Alice, since she proceeded to start yelling at us that this was her house, and if we weren't going to promise to not burn it down, we might as well go someplace else. While she goes and buys the ingredients we already decided not to buy, after asking her why she was acting this way, she started yelling on how we can never give her a break, and how it was a simple thing, how little trust and thought she had on us. I guess that's what broke the camel's back, since at this point she focused on yelling at my partner on how she didn't know how to put up with any of this woke BS, and how we should just leave if we weren't able to put up with it. Where did that even come from? Can we all just keep in mind that this started with spilled salt? Like, yeah, I get it, it's bad luck, but God, holy hell. At this point, my partner was holding back tears since they have a history of abuse, which Alice knows about, and she was triggering an episode. Alice just left, I guess, and Summer came in with no visible anger or any of the feelings her partner had just described her having. She acknowledged that it was an honest accident, and that if we were still willing, we could start once Alice came back. I just couldn't. I really wanted to get Steven and my partner out of there. My partner was mid-panic attack, and Steven was beyond uncomfortable. We ended up leaving, thanking Summer for the food and the wonderful campaign she had planned for us. We didn't return the next week or the week after that. My problem with this was, out of every player, we would bring the food, the snacks. I'd draw portraits of any part I could. I'd even help clean afterwards with my partner. I'd bring extra dice, or even help with prepping and doing extra things. She had told me before that myself and my partner were the only ones who would help out at times, so why would she bust out of anger at all three of us? I haven't played in a month, and I doubt I'll be returning anytime soon, but I don't know if I should feel guilty or not. Even though the answer is rather obvious, this was posted as Am I the Asshole, so, you know, drum roll please. Not the asshole! Obviously. I don't even know what you'd be guilty of. leaving when somebody's screaming at you. That's a pretty healthy thing to do generally. Spilling the salt, I mean, yeah, that's annoying, but it was an accident at the end of the day. You didn't do it out of malice. Alice seems very extreme, and that reaction to spilled salt is just not okay. Look, I'm gonna come out and say it, screaming at your friends in the vast majority of cases is not okay. It's rude, and besides, they're your friend. You're supposed to be pulling for one another, not attacking each other over spilled salt. And frankly, it's not attacking each other, it's just Alice doing the attacking. I have been in a very scarily similar situation, down to the person leaving, slamming the door, and then coming back in to make further points, even though nobody was asking. It's not great. And this friendship does not seem very healthy in the long run. What truly amazes me is that DM Summer thought they could continue after that outburst, which, yeah, no way. I joined a 5th edition group a few years ago. It was my second campaign I'd ever played in. I met this group through an online posting and we played a weekly game at the library. It was a lot of fun and I got along with everyone at the table. Or, you know, at least I thought so. For the first few months, I played a cleric. The DM ran very difficult encounters and the players all loved it, myself included. It was not at all surprising that a few of us lost characters over time. Eventually, my cleric fell and I submitted my new character for approval. The character was a young male druid who was to become the new leader of his druidic order when he came of age. Until then, he had to prove himself by going out and conquering many evils in the world and to maintain the balance of nature. Only then would he be worthy of becoming a true leader. The idea was to have him be this shy, awkward character as he got used to dealing with people and learning to be a leader. I dumped charisma and played him as a shy and unsure person who second-guessed himself frequently. The DM approved the character and said he would work some backstory into the campaign if he could. Characters were introduced to my druid next session, and all was well. I had spells set up to support our composition, and outside of combat, I was able to give some great roleplay. This went on for a few sessions before, during some downtime, my character explained more of his backstory about traveling the world and gaining experience. One of the players, our barbarian, then says, "Oh, so you're just ripping off Critical Role then?" I was confused because I knew of the show because a few players at the table talked about it from time to time, but I had never watched it. Apparently my character was too similar to the druid from their first campaign because she also had to go out and learn to be a leader. A few players agree with the barbarian and mock my character for being a lazy ripoff, while the other players defend me. I simply explained I've never watched the show, and even if my character is similar, I couldn't have known. The DM tries to maintain peace at the table and get us back on track without picking a side himself. Next couple of sessions get a little more hostile, with players refusing to help me in combat and becoming increasingly nasty towards me in and out of character. There becomes a rather tense divide at the table as a result that was partially because of the issues with my character and some other issues that happened away from the table between some members who were related to the game. The DM tries again to just keep everyone on track and calm, but it eventually fails, and a full-blown shouting match between a few players starts up and gets us kicked out of the library for the day. I messaged in the group chat the next day that I'd be happy to retire the character and play something else if it would help fix the tensions, as I felt bad for causing all of this drama. But the damage had already been done. The game never picked back up, and I had lost my second play group. This was a year ago, and honestly, I still feel terrible about it. Not gonna lie, I am a tad behind on this post, so I hope the OP is no longer sad about this because it is not at all their fault. First and foremost, every character is based on somebody. When you create a D&D character, you're going to be taking inspiration from somewhere, intentionally or unintentionally. I have done this countless times without even meaning to, and that is perfectly okay. Basing things off other things is a big hallmark of playing D&D. Often people do this so they can embody the pieces of fantasy and media that they love in a new and interesting way, and that is part of the fun of this game. The worst part here is that this guy didn't even do it intentionally. He just created a druid character that happened to be a little bit like Keyleth, which, yeah, look, I understand the similarities, but a nervous person who learns to be a leader is not exactly a Keyleth specific thing. I have no idea what Marisha's creative process was when she was creating Keyleth and her backstory and personality, but I'm sure she based it off of something, because everybody takes inspiration from somewhere, even the best of the best. Look, at the end of the day, you're not at fault for incidentally being similar to another character. Frankly, the group's at fault for getting so heated about it. Firstly, I would like to say that I'm using a throwaway for a reason. Specifically, my abhorrent sexual fetishes, which I admit to in this thread. I should start by confessing something. I have a thing for incest. I can't explain why, but I find incest really hot, and that, unfortunately, is the crux of this story. I admit it's mostly my fault, but it was still uncomfortable for me, as well as for the other players. The characters in this story are me, playing a human bard. DM, our group's DM. She's actually a really good DM, in spite of what you might think, based on this story. She is the antagonist of the tale, unfortunately. Fighter, a very good friend of mine, playing a half-elf fighter. Rogue, a former friend who is playing a human rogue. Wizard, another former friend who is playing a halfling wizard. Now, with the introductions out of the way, our story begins with a group of friends who started our group in college. For 3 years, we had an amazing game which I could tell much more of in positive stories, and I still do have good memories of this game. Unfortunately, it wasn't going to be the last. One night after a game, a few of us went to the bar and I had a bit too much to drink. DM ended up driving me home, and during the car ride, my ass confessed my incest fetish to her. That was something I never have done while sober, and was a massive mistake on my part. But at the time, I thought she reacted positively. If only I knew how wrong I was. The next 2 sessions passed without issue, but I learned that there was issues back in my character's home village, and our party decided to investigate. By the time we arrived back at my character's hometown, I'd honestly forgotten about my drunken confession to the DM. Unfortunately, she hadn't. When we arrived at my character's hometown, we learned that a large portion of the village, including my character's father, had been kidnapped by a roving band of orcs. We, being a mostly good party, including my bard, who was very, very lawful good, immediately decided that we would rescue the hostages. At this point, we were treated to our first mildly weird moment, namely my bard's mother being given a special scene where she holds him really close and talks about how much of a man her brave little boy has grown into. Oh, God. At the time, it was pretty innocent, but in hindsight, DM put a disturbing amount of detail into it, especially how large... I have a real bad feeling about the future of this story. After this little moment, we went to fight the orcs. It was a very difficult combat, but we enjoyed it a lot, and the boss fight came with the orc chieftain, and it was honestly incredible. Sadly, it was overshadowed by what came afterwards. When we went to rescue the prisoners, we had discovered that all of the men among the prisoners had been surgically, I don't know if I can say that, dick chopped by the orcs. This already made all of us, except the DM of course, uncomfortable, but only Rogue really spoke up about it at the time. In addition, when I asked about my character's father, we had learned that he had been sacrificed to the orcs' dark gods. DM explicitly stated that this was after he had been dick chopped by the rest of the men. My character actually had a really nice roleplay moment when our party found his father's corpse. He was utterly devastated. This had been the man who taught him to approach the world with a smile on his face, with a song on his lips, and he was gone. Not only was he gone, but he had been utterly humiliated, spit on, stripped of dignity before his death too. My character insisted on taking his corpse to town where he could be given a proper burial, but for some weird reason, DM seemed almost annoyed by this. After we got to town, DM described to us how distraught the village women were to hear of their husband/sons/brothers conditions. This was to be expected, but when she got to my character's mother, reacting to seeing her exhausted son carrying her husband's corpse into town, something changed, and it was noticeable to everyone at the table. She seemed to put more detail into her appearance than her emotions. I feel like it would be in very bad taste to mention specifics, but the phrase heaving bosom was uttered several times as DM described my character's mother in her state of mourning over the man she married. It was honestly kind of disgusting, and I could tell the other players noticed as well, though none of us said anything. The townsfolk held a celebration for us after our defeat of the orcs, but I made it very clear that my character wasn't really in the celebrating mood. He was drunk, but more to forget the horrific things that happened to his father than out of any sort of merriment. Then DM made her move. She described her bard's mother walking in on my character, half drunk and sullen, in the tavern while everyone else was outside enjoying the festivities. DM made it clear she meant everyone, including the tavern keeper. We were alone together, holy... Then she told me how, while my character's mother was devastated by the loss of my character's father, she had been missing a man in her life, even before the orcs had kidnapped him. I probably should have objected at this point, but I honestly just didn't know what to do. Then DM described my character's mother offering to soothe the pain for both of us and taking off her clothes. While we had discussed and we were okay with NSFW themes in the campaign, this was a bit much, and Fighter explicitly stated he was not okay with what was going on currently. Wizard and Rogue immediately said so as well, and I finally had the guts to speak up myself. At this point, DM kind of freaked out a bit, not by a lot. She wasn't screaming or bursting into tears or anything, but she was noticeably upset. She told us that the entire village subplot had been arranged because of me and the thing that I told her about on the way home from the bar several weeks ago. I honestly don't remember much of what happened next. It was a screaming match, and being a naturally timid person, I hate screaming matches. What's worse, a large portion of the screaming from everyone else, I do mean everyone, was directed at me. I can't say it wasn't deserved because this was all my fault, but I was really upset by it. In the aftermath, our group disbanded entirely. Wizard no longer talks to me at all, and Rogue says our friendship is over. Thankfully, Fighter is still friends with me. It's been several days, and I still haven't talked to DM. Fighter claims she had a crush on me, which I'm not sure if I believe, but that would explain a lot of her actions. I am not really sure what to do, honestly. I know this is all my fault, but I'm not really sure how to make amends. This has caused a huge fracture at our table, and even if we somehow end up bringing it back together, I don't think it will ever be the same. I'd honestly really appreciate some advice, though I know that isn't the purpose of this sub. Advice is the purpose of this channel, and I'm gonna come out and say it. Look, although the OP has some weird proclivities, that's not their fault, and frankly, they did not mean to tell anyone about this, and just because someone tells you a weird fact about themselves, that doesn't mean you have to act upon it. This would be the bard's fault if the bard put this plot into the game and pursued their own mother on their own volition, but that's not what happened. The DM is the one who forced this into the game, and frankly, although the OP complimented the DM's abilities earlier, I am going to respectfully disagree. This is god-awful. It is one of the most uncomfortable horror stories I have ever read, and no, it is not the OP's fault. The DM did this. The DM created this whole plot line to appeal to this. Now, I don't know exactly what was said during that screaming match, but I'm going to take a wild guess and say that the DM likely framed the conversation in the car more as the OP trying to force the subplot into the game and asking the DM to include it, and that's why the other players were so upset. Look, if the OP's telling the truth here, and they just half-drunkenly mentioned their thing, then that is a perfectly innocuous, if not embarrassing conversation that I'm sure you'd be able to move on from in time. However, with the DM's actions and the party's freak out, I mean, it's gonna be really hard to get this game back together, and honestly, for the OP, I don't think it's worth it to put yourself through that again. Yeah, their proclivities are weird, but they don't seem to be acting on them or hurting anybody. It's the DM who has caused the harm here, and yeah, that really sucks to see. Alright, and that's going to be it for today's episode of RPG Horror Stories. If you guys enjoyed, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then you can check out Tabletop Tavern Tips, my series where I give advice to both DMs and players, old and new, and while you're there in the cards. Subscribe Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content right as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment. It's not a ripoff, dude, to let me know you made it to the end of the video. And this is like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.